And we've had a group of people working on a project through the Appalachian Region Commission, which you'll learn about more here in a few minutes. I just want to introduce the folks that have been working on that project. Today we have Bill Shockey with us. Bill is the Agriculture Extension Agent over in Preston County, West Virginia with West Virginia University Extension. And we have Sherry Frick. Sherry's with University of Maryland Extension in Allegheny County. We've had some other folks in West Virginia, H.R. Scott, the Agriculture Extension Agent Educator in Monongalia County, as well as some of the specialists. I always forget all these names, but Lewis McDonald and oh, Bill, you have to help me out because I always forget.
Jeff Skousen.
Jeff Skousen, yes, Dr. Skousen has been working with us over there, as well as in Maryland, our specialty crop person, Andrew Risby. And in Pennsylvania, we've been working with Leanna Dubstott, who is the Agriculture Extension Educator in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. So that's the group of people that's kind of put the day's presentation together. We thank them for all their work. None of us are hemp experts. We've gotten into this because we think there's an opportunity here to learn more about growing and processing fiber hemp. And so we hope to share those opportunities with you. We share what we've learned. And this is just the beginning, hopefully, of something that might be good for this region as far as agriculture is concerned. So I'm going to turn the program over to Bill to do the presentation. We will have some questions and answers at the end, so you can put those in the chat area if you're familiar with using the chat. If not, just go down to the bottom of the screen and click on the chat box. It'll come up on the right side, and just type in a message there. The other thing is we need to let you know that we are recording this. We will be providing this recording for other folks to watch later on. So this is your warning that you're being recorded. Anything else, Sherry or Bill, before I turn it over?
Oh, I think that's pretty good. Just to remind folks to please keep your mics off and your cameras off so that we have good video quality for our recording today. Thank you very much.
All righty, I'll turn mine off. Go ahead, Bill.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you very much, Willie, for that kind introduction. And yes, what we've got is a group of folks. I'll go ahead and see if I can get my slides back up again. West Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. So this is a regional type project that we got together, and we just sort of decided, well, you know, what's the likelihood of growing hemp in this region? Does anybody really know how to grow it? Will it grow well here? And if we do grow it, what do you want to grow? So in 2020, we got a grant through the Appalachian Regional Commission, and it was a grant basically to study the feasibility of growing hemp we originally defined a 6-county region: Somerset, Fayette, Pennsylvania, Garrett, Allegheny, Maryland, and Preston, Monongalia, West Virginia. We have very similar topography, very similar climate in that area. And so we basically, the grant is a feasibility study to just determine, is there interest by producers in growing hemp, and if so, what kind of processing facility would need to be available, or how far away would it need to be useful and in order to be able to market these products. So again, there we go. Just taking a look at the ARC Power Grant. What is ARC? It's the Appalachian Regional Commission. And over the years, for the whole Appalachian region, they have awarded, well, in 2020 only, $43 million, 51 projects. Over the period since they've been in existence, they've awarded a total of $238 million to basically support the economic development in coal-impacted areas. And again, in our 6-county region, we've certainly fallen to that category as well. So this is the Appalachian Regional area, goes all the way from New York, clear into Mississippi and Alabama. You see here the number of projects in the areas, and you can see there's quite a few in the Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania area. And so we were able to take advantage of that justification to be able to take a look at seeing if we can get this power grant to help us out economically, and whether hemp could be a factor in that. So with that and the background, let's go ahead and talk about industrial hemp. And in particular, what we're going to talk about is fiber and grain production. I know a lot of folks who have already dived into hemp production have been looking at the CBD oil. A lot of those folks have indicated the marketing potential there in terms of reliability of market is tenuous at best. And so we were taking a look at more of a ground up approach to see what we can do with the fiber and grain production. And let's talk about that a little bit, at least as much as we know about it. Historically, hemp was grown a great deal. The British required their colonies to grow hemp, and in Maryland and Virginia were huge hemp producers in the 1700s. You don't need to think too much about that. You can use hemp to make canvas, used for sails and ships, was used to make rope. And so when you think about the countries that have a large navy and a merchant fleet, these were very much in high demand. Hemp products were. Then later on, other crops began to take over: cotton, tobacco, and then finally, sort of the nail in the coffin for hemp production in the United States were a lot of the restrictions that were placed on it. In the early part of the 20th century here, 1906, there was some tax, and then there was the marijuana tax of 1937. And what later really ended hemp production in 1970 was the Controlled Substance Act, which essentially prohibited the growth of even industrial hemp, not just marijuana or that containing the THC, but all hemp was outlawed. So just right off the top of my head, that's just a little over 50 years ago. And so no hemp has been grown, and that is part of the reason why we're at a little bit of a knowledge gap disability here, particularly from the university standpoint, in trying to tell folks how to grow it, what kind of varieties to grow, and things that we're pretty good on when you get to regular crops like corn and oats and hay. Anyway, the 2018 Farm Bill reestablished hemp as an agricultural commodity. And so that's what really a lot of folks got started with the CBD oil varieties, because they had promises of large returns per acre with the CBD oil. Those that are able to get it marketed do believe have a fairly good return on it. The issue is having to get those markets moving. And, you know, I think a lot of that has to do with just being a relatively young crop, and just that we're just not mature enough yet in getting the products from the farm to the market to the final consumer. Boom, boom. Here is one key to the 2018 Farm Bill that you need to understand. Each state develops their own regulations for hemp production. And as Willie and I and Anna in Pennsylvania found, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia have a lot of differences in their bills and in their laws and regulations. So just to summarize a little bit here, and without going into each state individually, each state does have an application process. There's a fee involved. It ranges anywhere from $150 to $550. They do have annual deadlines for application for the season crop. Currently, none of them have any limit on the amount of hemp produced. It's a matter of registering acreage and locations. The grower must obtain an FBI check, a background check. There will be THC testing involved because THC, the marijuana plant looks exactly like the industrial hemp plant. So they want to ensure that there are no plants with that level gets too high. They have regulated limits and they test for it. If your industrial hemp crop, the THC gets a little too high, they can be destroyed. And then again, just the disclaimer here, states have additional regulations and requirements. And if you go to either the Maryland Department of Ag, Pennsylvania Department of Ag, or the West Virginia Department of Agricultural website, so you can find a great deal of information there about the specifics of applying for the ability to grow hemp. So now let's talk about this a little bit. I was just talking about CBD. I was talking a little bit about fiber. There's basically 3 market classes involved in the production of hemp. There's the fiber hemp, which, as you might guess, involves the product has a rather fibrous nature and it's long and thin. There's the grain varieties, which would have a little better seed head. You can see some seed heads over here. These are basically not so much fiber, a little more grain. Then we have the CBD varieties, which are very different. That's a different type of plant. It's a small bushier plant, and they are female plants only. We'll get into that just a bit. So we're looking at the fiber and the grain areas for our region, and as part of this feasibility study. And so, what is it that we're talking about here? Well, the fiber is part of a plant. When you have the fiber varieties, you have a long stem. You have a thing here called the bark or the bast, which is the outside edge of the fiber, and then there's a core, or they call that a herd. Is part of the fibrous part of the plant. Seeds, see a pile of seeds here, can be used that press some oil. There are hemp hearts and there's hemp seed. And I didn't realize this until I gave this presentation a couple weeks ago. One of my master gardeners says, well, yeah, I just bought some hemp grain that I used on my add to my cereal in the morning. I said, well, does this help you any? And he said, well, it doesn't hurt. There's not much taste to it. And then there's the plant chemical varieties. Here's those that were looking for CBD oil, the smokable flowers. So again, those are the different kinds of products. This is a little closer picture showing the fiber structure, the herd or the core versus the bast or the fiber on the stalk, on the outside stalk portion. This is what a fiber hemp on the left, what it looks like. It's got a very hollow center and a much sturdier frame on the outside. The other types of hemp have more of are not hollow, have a tinier hole in the center. I imagine this has to do with giving the taller fiber hemp a little more of an opportunity to bend and sway without snapping off. And so let's look a little bit closer at the fiber hemp products. And as I say, why are we taking a look at these? Well, there's probably a lot of things. You look at the market down the road a bit that these may be very useful for. Let's consider plastics, for example. Fiber hemp can be used to make plastic. Don't ask me the specific process there, but we were told that it can. And so it would be very good if we could get plastics that maybe were a little more sustainable, a little more biodegradable for our environment. Textiles, paper, cloth, rope. Talked about that earlier, but we gave this presentation a couple weeks ago again. A faculty member at WVU in their clothing design department saw the presentation, was very interested in perhaps pursuing some sort of relationship between hemp and wool in developing some fabrics. Of course, paper and building materials, fiberboard installation. Those are products, and even molded products, animal bedding. I've heard of using and molding body parts for automobiles and so on. So the potential for hemp being able to come in as a sustainable source of fiber for the variety of different uses is pretty large. So what is this plant we're talking about? Let's discuss the botany of it a bit. And one of the things to consider is they're called a short day plant. And what we're told here is, and those that have had some experience that we've talked to, the flowering part of the plant is triggered by day lengths, decreasing daylights. And we are told that when the summer solstice hits, that they begin to flower a great deal, and of course that affects the product that you're growing. It begins to signal to the plant they stop their growing in length. This would have implications for fibrous hemp, where you're looking at larger, longer stems. They are what we call deciduous. Deciduous means there are both male plants and female plants. And that has some implications here, in that the plants where CBD oil is harvested from are female plants only. Plants that are grown for fiber or grain are not sexed, if you will. Both male and female plants are grown there together, but it makes some issue in terms of pollination. If you have someone growing hemp for CBD oil, you need to ensure that the next closest is probably miles away, so that you don't have cross pollination. And the other thing about the flowering is that they don't, although they are triggered by the day length changes, they don't really develop nice and at the same time, like your corn harvest, or like when your oats get ripe. Hey, the oats are all right. Well, these things they get themselves ripe whenever they're good and ready, and so they develop over a period of time. So it requires a little more patience and a little different management strategy. Now, so where do you grow them? What are some of the cultural practices we look at? Well, basically they grow where in the better soils, where our good crops are already selected for growing. They don't do very well in wet soils. They don't do well in our compacted or heavy clay soils that are around. They tend to grow very well, which where our desirable row crops are, cereal grains, and our forage crops already grow. So when you're thinking about this, if you're talking about farmland, growing hemp as a new enterprise, well, if you're already growing other crops, you'll either maybe need to decrease some of the acreage of some of your other crops, or you need to clear new land. But understand, you'll need to be looking at soils that are fairly good quality. Tillage methods, there are a variety of different tillage methods. There's conventional tillage. You can use conservation tillage methods and no-till. This particular photograph happens to show hemp seed that was no-tilled into a field that had a cover crop that was crushed or rolled before they put the seed in. So that is again, it's a variety of methods to get it going. Fertility. Again, you're not going to save a lot on fertility. It's not like buckwheat that grows on the lousy soils. You're going to have have a pH between about 6 and 7. You should soil test your crop, and our best guess, based on the composition of the crop and the average yields, that we would be needing about 20 pounds of phosphate and 20 pounds of potash to support the growth of that hemp crop. So if you're already at optimum levels of P and K, you'd want to add about that much more to maintain that optimum level, because your crop will be taking that much off. And then we'd be looking again at about 150 pounds of nitrogen to be able to support a crop. So when do we plant? Basically, May to early June is supported by Pennsylvania data, where they've worked with this a little bit, and they drill the stands at a seeding rate of about 35 to 50 pounds per acre, and they're looking for about 15 plants per square foot. Now, by successful establishment, that you can do that again. We talked about any tillage method, both with tillage, with no tillage. We do want, if you do till completely, complete tillage, you want to watch your planting depth, and you want a fine but firm seed bed to occur. And then by that bottom comment there, really you just need to do what you need to do to be able to get the crop out ahead of the weeds. So you want to start with a good clean field, whether you get, however you get that field clean, whether by cover crop or by complete tillage, you need to get ahead of the weeds. I think my next slide shows it begins to show, but there really is nothing approved for weed control yet in hemp. So let's talk a little about integrated pest management. And what we're looking at is at present, disease and insect pests are really not all that common. And again, let me go back to what we said in the beginning. Maybe it's because we haven't planted the crop very much lately, and it's a relatively new crop in the field. Maybe the disease and the insect pests that would show up as a pest haven't really discovered that it's there yet. So some potential disease, there's some molds, leaf spots, root rots, and maybe even some blight. Yeah, you might need to be watching out for. And some of the insects that may become a problem. Again, cutworms, grubs, flea beetles, these are the kind of insects that might eventually turn into a pest. But again, I'll just emphasize at this point, pests are not common. Disease and insect pests are not common. Of course, down the road, you know, I haven't seen much yet that a deer won't eat. So there's always your wildlife issues that could come into play. And now let me drop back to weed management. As I indicated, there's no chemical herbicides currently labeled for weed control at this time. I mean, some things like vinegar, acetic acid can be used to burn back some weeds, but you know, how effective they are, typically they're not all that effective, and to use it enough that they are effective, they get pretty pricey. Use of glyphosate to burn down the field before you plant. That's an off-label use. It is, I'm told it's being used. There is the potential to plant so that you can do mechanical cultivation. We don't know of anyone doing this, but that is another possibility. But in terms of what herbicides, what insecticide, what fungicide you might use, you always have to go back and look at the EPA approved list, and then don't just stop there, because as with the hemp regulations, each state has control over what herbicides, what pesticides are used in their own state, what are legal for sale and what are not. So you always have to go back and look at your state's list. So where do you get seed? I mean, you're going to have to plant something. Where do you get it? And so we're going to kind of fall back a little bit on our old recommendations, is that you always want a good variety of seed. Well, or a good certified seed, something that's grown. In terms of variety, you have to decide, you're going to go for grain, you're going to go for fiber. Understand these are not what we call feminized. Or if you're going to go the CBD route, that's fine too, but be sure nobody's growing grain or fiber hemp anywhere near you. But as I was mentioned, in terms of seed, you always want to look for good quality seed. If you can find a certified seed, something that has been verified by some official agency as to the germination percent, how clean is it, how true to its variety it is. Of course, getting that kind of guarantee and getting that kind of certification is a cost. And but I can hardly think of anything that is more a good investment, because if you purchase seed for any crop and it does not come up, it does not germinate properly, you're going to lose a lot more money than the difference in the cost of the seed. All right, so what do we do with this stuff if we get some planted successfully and we get some growing? I mean, these are questions that I still have. I really haven't seen much of this going on myself, but I'm relying on what some folks are telling me. And so what they basically say in the bottom line is, if you can make hay, you probably have equipment on hand that you can use to harvest fiber hemp. Now, that said, there's some differences here, and I need to qualify that a little as we go on. They do recommend, of course, you have to have your tillage equipment, you have to have a planter or some kind of grill. But here, in terms of harvest equipment, they're recommending a sickle bar mower or a disc bind. The discs, not the sickle bar under the rollers, not a hay bind, but a disc bind. And you need to have a tedder, a rake, and a baler available. Now, let's talk about these just a little bit here. And again, here's a picture of a sickle bar mower. Down here, it looks probably a disc bind going along. And as I say, the hay bind, or traditional hay binds, do not work very well here. Part of that might have to be, if you're using a disc bind, you want to be sure that you use crimping rolls. They do not recommend using the flails as a conditioning device. And you probably will have to open those rollers up a little bit wider than you would for hay. As you look at this stuff laying on the ground, those stems are a lot bigger and a lot heavier and a lot tougher than orchard grass or timothy or whatever your traditional hay crop might be. Whenever it's mowed, it's not recommended it's windrowed. I'll mention that for the reason for that in a moment. Do watch out for wrapping, and that by that I mean this stuff getting caught in the bearings of your rollers or your machinery. This stuff is heavy duty, and bearings and things can get damaged very quickly. As I said, if you got the hay equipment, you probably have the basic equipment that would be necessary to harvest hemp. However, I'm not sure it's heavy duty enough to be able to handle the hemp. So not everybody has recommendations at this point. We did find a few manufacturers, dealers that were willing to make some recommendations regarding hemp harvesting, given that they have worked with some people. And we're not saying Vermeer to the exclusion of other brands, but they typically recommend a trail mower to be pulled behind as the primary mowing equipment. Now, once you mow it, the process, and this is what I wanted to mention, come back to, I learned a new term called retting. Retting is a process where, if you remember that picture of the fiber core and then the outside edge of the fiber, they say there's a little bit of a glue type substance in there that organisms break that down and to separate the outer fibers from the inner herd. And that process takes 2 weeks to 2 months. So we're not talking about hitting a 2 or 3 day haymaking window. We're talking about getting the stuff on the ground. And then depending upon the weather, it may be 2 weeks to 2 months before you're able to get that fiber up and through a baler. So again, this is why you don't rake. You leave them lay, so you have an even layer. And you're probably going to have to rake it whenever it does get to the point where you're ready. You might have to rake it 2 or 3 times. And the type of rake that's recommended to be used is not the wheel or roller bar, but rather a rotary rake. Seems to work best for those heavy fibers. Now the baling part of it. Either round or square bales are acceptable by square bales, I'm talking about those larger square bales that you would use for transportation. They'd fit better if you're hauling it some distance on a flatbed or semi truck or something. Now, but here's some of the things that we're looking for. Again, culturally, we're looking for 10 to 12% moisture at baling. That's a little bit drier than what we're looking at hay. We're looking at hay maybe at 15%. You'll get a real good, actually, I think 18%. We say you can go as high as without getting too much heating going on. And if you're equipped with the knives, we sent them at about a 1 foot length to aid in that processing. A recommended baler here is it's a beast. If we take a look, they're looking at a tractor horsepower rating here of 150 horsepower. That's not a little tractor. That's not a little baler. That's very heavy duty, but it is the kind of thing that if you're getting into the fiber hemp on a long-term basis, that's probably the kind of equipment you need to invest in to be able to withstand the test of time and be able to perform well over time. Harvesting for grain. This is just a typical type of combine apparatus moving through the field. Talk about harvesting for grain. Remember way back when I said this, the summer solstice and triggers the flowering and the grain production. Those things, again, it varies depending upon day length. And I also mentioned they aren't always in a real hurry, those flowers and the fluorescences, to get dry at the same time. So the recommendation is you don't wait until all of them are dry, because if you do, there'll be some seed shattering, which will lead to possibly some mold going on. So your target is to look to about 70% of the seed heads would be about ripe and ready for a harvest. Oh, so then what do you do with this stuff? That looks kind of like a cookie, kind of a mushy handful here. But you need to be able to try to clean it and dry it as quickly as possible, because molding and heating does begin fairly soon. And you want to get the drying down to what we're looking at, about an 8% moisture. And again, for those of you handling soybeans or corn, we're talking moisture levels, 10, 12 percentage range or a little more is where you're hauling it into the feed mill. But here we're looking at something closer to 8%. You don't want to get it too dry. Don't over dry it, because you will have hulls splitting open, which they tell us that once these little hulls split, microorganisms get in there and they begin a heating process. Let's talk a little bit about the bales and storage and how long. Bales that are, if they're stored under cover, can probably be stored indefinitely. We do need to they need to be protected from rain, and you need to monitor them to make sure that they don't get some mold growth in there. Again, those are big, heavy. You saw the size of those stems, and you're baling them up. And we're looking for moisture levels a little bit less than what we typically put our hay up at. So you want to be sure that you every now and then get a moisture probe, or get a temperature probe where you can stick into your bales and see if they're heating up on you or not. But now let's get into the bread and butter of this. And let's talk a little bit about our best guess at the economics and budgets that we want to be looking for and think that we might be able to get. As you know, production budgets, let's just, we went to some places where they grow some hemp. Missouri, Penn State, Cornell, and Kentucky all have some experience at growing hemp, and have all worked at putting some budgets together. Corn, soybeans, and hay, we've always had these folks that have been very good at putting together good production budgets and for our traditional crops. So we more or less took this data from multiple different places and tried to come up with our best guess of what a production budget would look like. Again, any production budget is going to have two kinds of costs. You're going to have your variable cost and you're going to have your fixed costs. Variable costs, your seed, fertilizer, chemical, any kind of a testing and licensing fee. Fixed costs, you're going to have equipment, you're going to have land. So let's looking at this. Seed costs, hemp. Hemp's a fairly wide range at this point, again, and I think that goes back to a relatively new crop where things haven't settled down very evenly yet, but we're probably looking at about $143 per acre is what the average cost per acre is what your hemp seed would be. Compare that to corn and soybeans, which are very, the markets are very mature. They've been around a long time. They don't have very much of a range associated with each of them, and both of them are much more affordable than the average of hemp. Fertilizer costs, hemp would probably be about $70 per acre. Again, if you think back based on what our best guess for application rates would be early on in the presentation. That's about where that settles in. Of course, fertilizer is a little more constant and not as variable. But that figure of $70 per acre compares very well with the average of corn and soybean, about halfway in between either one of them. So that's a cost that is something typical that most of you would be familiar with. Chemical costs, corn and soybeans, again, $37, $43 an acre for those crops. And remember, at this point, there's no pesticides really labeled for control of hemp. So we're banking on no disease or no insect issues, and we are wanting to ensure that you manage so that you get that hemp into a nice clean field so it gets up ahead of the weeds and is able to hold them off. And then there's an average land charge over all the crops. We estimated about $119 an acre for our region. So now putting that together and putting some yield data together, again, this is from the literature and also from our best guess for our region here. For hemp, we're looking at operating costs, 367, fixed costs of 188, adding up to 555. And then if you're looking at 4.74 tons per acre, which is our average of what we came up with for hemp, and getting $157 per ton, we would be looking at a return over cost of about $190 per ton. Following the same logic for our typical crops, here's the total costs. You want to take a look at our yields here. 162 is probably a pretty good average yield for our region, although I do know there's a few folks that are over 200 bushels per acre. Then there's soybean here at 51. So if your traditional yields are different than that, you need to make those adjustments when you come up here to try and looking at your return over total costs. And hay down here would be running about 120. So based on what our best guess is, hemp would probably be about an average of probably 40% or so higher than our traditional crops, provided everything goes well, and these yields are reasonable. Of course, I'm going to throw our disclaimer in real quick about about markets. Markets can fluctuate. Market price of hemp can vary. And of course, anytime you're starting with a new crop, your yields and management, right off the first year through, you're going to learn a few things. All of us are learning a few things. So it may take a while to get as efficient as we need to be to achieve that higher return per acre. So one of the things we do recommend, this is what we're talking, our folks that we've talked to that have already been dabbling in the CBD oil, is do your best to have a market identified and to have a crop contracted before you get your crop going. I mean, that's of course the bottom line. You need to have a place for your crop to go, or you're not going to get any money in your pocket. We admittedly, right now in our region, there are limited or no markets for fiber hemp in our area. There's just not close by. I think the closest place down in Virginia. And so that's a pretty good haul. So now you got transportation costs that were not included in that budget that we looked at. And this is why we are looking at the feasibility study to see what kind of a processing facility do you need? How big does it need to be? How much is it going to cost? And are we going to have enough folks around here that are interested in growing hemp to make all that worthwhile? So we're off on one of those trying to learn things. And with that, that's pretty much the end of as much as we know about the route here for fiber and grain hemp. I'm going to leave that on a little bit. This is being recorded, so it's someplace you can come back to look at contact information in Maryland, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania for if you want to learn more about what we're doing. These are the folks active on the project. I'm going to mention before I turn it over, Clear Loose, we do want you to take a survey. Again, we're wanting to get your interest in looking at hemp. What's holding you back from taking a look at it? What interest do you have in moving forward? What else do you need to know before you can make a decision? And also we probably will have a survey link out there, another link to evaluate our presentation here today to see if we are on target with telling you what we need to know. So with that, I'm going to stop talking so much, and we'll see if any of you have any questions. And Willie, I'm going to invite you to jump in here and plug up any holes that I might have missed as I was working through the presentation, especially if I said anything confusing or wrong that needs fixed.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot, Bill. You did a good job. I don't really think I know of anything that was needed to be added in. But please feel free to ask your questions. If you want to unmute and ask, you could do that. Or if you want to put your questions in the chat area, that would be two ways that you could ask questions. We have had a few other people join the call that I want to just give a shout out to real quick. One of those is Andrew Risby, who is the Specialty Crops Extension Specialist with the University of Maryland. He's been working with hemp for the last couple of years down at the Y Research Station, which is just across the bay, on the eastern shore of Maryland. And also Daryl Glodfeldy, who has joined, and Daryl is the president of the Mountain Maryland Hemp Alliance and a farmer here in Garrett County who has been helping spearhead these efforts of working with hemp here in Garrett County. So that's kind of a couple of other people's on the call there that I caught. If you have questions, they can also help us answer some of these questions. So I'll start looking down through the chat here and catching any questions. Sherry did put in the chat the link to the survey. The survey is just helping us to quantify people who would be interested and how many acres and some various things like that. It'll only take you probably 5 minutes at most. If you click on that link, it'll take you away from the or that link takes you to a Qualtrics survey away from the PowerPoint and the Zoom, but then you can go back and forth as you want there to complete that. So you can do that now, or you can do it a little later. There was a question about, can you please send me a copy of the slides? We can do that. If you would send me a email directly to, and I'll put my email address in here and I will do that for you. We do plan to post this to a website at some point, but we haven't got that quite figured out yet. So we'll let you all know. I'll send an email out to everyone who registered with that information at some point. That might not have went where I wanted it to go here. Let me try that again. Okay, everybody should have gotten that email address for me if you have questions on that. Okay, I'm going back up here. I heard you say if you grow CBD, those growing fiber need to be far away. How far? So the question is about the pollen transferring from a fiber crop that has males and females to a CBD crop that only has females. There's a study out of Canada that said 3 miles that could go, but we don't know how that applies to here with the mountainous area and the trees in between and things like that. So I haven't, if anybody knows of anything more specific, that's kind of the information that we have that we're currently working off of. And there is no rules yet, federal or state, that we're aware of that says you have to be so far away. And there's really no effort appears to be made by the departments of agriculture or whoever's in charge of hemp to ensure this. So, you know, it's hard on the CBD growers because a person could right beside them decide to grow fiber hemp, and I'm not sure there's much they can do about it. So this is an issue that needs to be addressed more as we move on through the time, especially for CBD growers.
Yeah, can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the reasons why we formed the Mountain Maryland Hemp Alliance, is kind of to coordinate these efforts and, you know, be transparent amongst people growing hemp, what's going on, so we can plan for successful crops. We don't want one farmer to not have a successful year just because there was a lack of communication. So we're really setting this up to have a group of farmers working together to make sure we're all successful. And that's really why we formed the Alliance, to coordinate these efforts once these issues start to come about and make a plan for them going forward. So what we've been doing on our farm for this fiber stuff is creating some bubbles on maps to figure out where we can actually plant that would make sense, using kind of the 3 mile rule that Willie was talking about. Again, we're not sure. I've heard that most of the pollen will drop within 1,000 to 2,000 feet of the crop. So there's that. And also we have the mountains and the trees, as Willie said, to think about as well for that. But that's all I had to add.
All right, thanks, Daryl. Good point.
Yep.
And the question says, in Maryland, from a nutrient management advisor standpoint, anything special to look at other than confirming they are certified to grow it? Also, the 4.74 tons, a good yield to use for planting. Yes, and Ashley, I know you're a nutrient management advisor, and I'm not sure, I know that there are some, fertility recommendations built into the nutrient management programming for hemp. I need to take a look at whether that's CBD or fiber, and maybe we need to have some more discussions. Andrew's very involved in nutrient management as well. I don't know that there's really much else to be looking at. The yields data, I'll just tell you, came from the ones that Bill mentioned, the universities that we looked at their budgets. And I think, they were like 4, 4, and 5. And that's how it come out there, 5, 5, and 4. That's how it come out to 4.74. So it seems like that's in the ballpark from a yield standpoint. But that's from data from other states at this point. We don't have any real solid data of our own at this point.
Willie?
Yes, go ahead, Andrew.
The it's 100. I think that Newman wants or the recommendations are 120 pounds of nitrogen per acre for hemp, and it's regardless of whether it's CBD or fiber or grain. It's all the same. Since we haven't really gotten down to the Nicole and I have the research for the CBD, and it's kind of pointing towards that rate right now. But right now for fiber and grain, it's 120 pounds of nitrogen per acre.
Okay, thank you very much. You said there is a market for fiber hemp in Virginia. Please explain what the market is, or does it mean that is the closest processing plant for fiber hemp? So yes, I believe the statement was that is the closest place or is a processing facility that we are currently aware of. It's in Wytheville, Virginia. Haven't been there myself, but if you do some Googling, you can find that facility. It's the Appalachian Hemp Processing or something like that is the name of the facility. It was conceived back in the fall of 2019 with funding from the state of Virginia and some others. And their website that I was on back a few months ago said that they were processing product. So again, that facility, looking at like Western Maryland, West Virginia, Morgantown area would be over 250-ish miles. So that's probably too far to haul, round bales or bales of fiber for processing for many products. Now, not saying that a specialty product couldn't be hauled and get your product back if you have a real specialty product kind of deal. So, and that's part of what we'll be looking at with our consultant and in this whole processing idea is trying to figure out, what products and how far away, that was mentioned in the presentation. So let me see if there's any other questions. The surveys there. For Maryland, does a farmer have to apply annually to plant hemp? The answer to that is yes, absolutely. I don't believe there's a deadline, but I may be wrong on that. But you do have to apply through the Maryland Department of Agriculture. You have to annually have a FBI background check and pay the fee. There's currently 2 programs open. There's the Maryland Hemp Farming Program and the research program, which was under the old 2014 Farm Bill. Maybe not enough time here to explain what both of those mean, but if you're looking to get into that, you could contact myself or Daryl or Andrew, wherever you're located at, the closest person, and we can have a little discussion about what exactly that means. But yes, there is annual at this point. Apply for membership to the Global Hemp Association. So thanks for providing that information, and folks can check out that link. I have heard that hemp can be used for building cinder type blocks. Haven't specifically heard that, but then somebody else put in about hempcrete and the use there. There was a workshop last summer over in the Lancaster County, Pennsylvania area where they were using, they were doing a workshop on how to build buildings out of hempcrete. Interestingly enough, in that article, the hemp parts that they were using, it came from not from the United States, from overseas. And again, it just emphasizes the fact that processing, the lack of processing is right now the key to many of these potential products that, could be made out of hemp, but there's just not a lot of things out there. We're hoping with our consultant to learn a lot more about that. We're hoping to also see what kind of processes are out there worldwide that bridge the gap between something very rudimentary that a person might be able to do by hand, which was obviously done back, in the 19th century, up through, these $1 million machines that are currently being utilized in some parts of the world to process hemp. And we obviously, in this area of the world, we're not going to have, tens of thousands of acres, which may be required to keep one of those big, huge machines fed. So we definitely are interested in looking at, is there any intermediary, smaller processing sizes that make sense for more of a regional product that could be done here? That's just some of the thoughts that we've been having as far as the consultant is concerned. So just 1 or 2 last comments then from me. If you have any questions, please ask them, or like I said, you can unmute or stick them in the chat. We are just about to kick off working with our consultant. So we'll be having regular meetings with the consultant. If you have any comments or questions or thoughts that you'd like to share with us, please do that by contacting any of us I mentioned on the call. We can insert that information. The other thing that we're getting ready to have a discussion about is doing some trials of hemp, specifically fiber and grain hemp in 2021. Our idea this year is to try to get a few plantings around the region, just so we have those for use for demonstration. for people to get an idea of what this stuff looks like. I know we showed you a slide of somebody mowing it. Maybe this summer, if we can get a couple trials, we can actually have people out when this stuff is being mowed so they can see what kind of equipment and power and that kind of stuff that it might take. So that's our goal this year. Give us a little firsthand experience in dealing with harvesting, planting, and dealing with the fiber hemp. We do have a call tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. If there's anybody on the call that would like to join us, again, please send me an email and I will send you the Zoom link for that call to talk about trials here.
Hey, Willie, can I add one more thing?
Or please do.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in growing fiber hemp, it's really important that you understand what varieties you're getting. Grain hemp for that matter, dual crop. We've had we had a trial here down at Y Research and Education Center earlier this year, partnering with University of Kentucky and some other land grant institutions, and we found that a lot of the varieties that they were getting from northern latitudes, Europe, Canada, did not do well in Maryland. It's possible that it could be latitude oriented with light, and they were flowering way too early. And so it's really important that you have a discussion with your seed provider, not only considering seed quality, germination issues that Bill was referring to earlier, but we had just had a conversation with the person at University of Kentucky regarding that and the regional trials that we were all participating in. And this has actually happened before we developed that slide, or actually after we developed the slide that Bill had showed everyone today. That it really comes down to the varieties that are being formed may not be good for this latitude. So we have to be really careful in deciding which varieties we're growing here in Maryland.
Yeah, I think that's really good, Andrew. And I think that's part of the reason we want to look at the trials. We can test out a few of those varieties this coming year that we think are going to work well here, in addition to just getting a little bit of experience. There was a couple comments and questions here that are kind of related about there being no market for fiber hemp in our area and why would we think about growing it, especially with the cost. And I think saying cost is a good thing because in Maryland, you're going to pay $250 minimum for your license, plus the FBI background check and other costs you're going to have for testing. So, you are looking at putting out, decent amount of money in addition to seed and some of the other things. And some of that was also built into the budgets that Bill showed you earlier. But then there was another question about what is the market for hemp in the US? And I guess my answer for that is we're going to try to figure that out. And, because the question is, this is a product that, unlike corn, that's going to get maybe completely processed, into a dry material on the farm, it has to go somewhere else. And that whole process of moving it from the farm to the processing facility, a trailer load of corn has a good bit of value. A trailer load of round bales of hemp may not have enough value to justify shipping it 500, 600, 800 miles, like maybe corn could be shipped. But there's always limitations for every crop. So when we look at this, it's probably going to be somewhat more regional than some of the other crops that we're typically looking at growing. And that's one of the reasons for thinking about the processing side and how critical the processing side is for this. And then I guess just to answer the question, why even consider it, is the idea that, it is a new and emerging crop, has potential to have a lot of, it's good environmentally. It's a crop that if it's made into a product that stays around with us, say hempcrete or flooring or some other kind of plastic, we are taking carbon out of the environment and putting it into a permanent product, and we're offsetting the use possibly of oils being pulled out of the ground. So there's a lot of positive things for this crop, but we still have to figure out how to grow it, process it, and make money on it for farmers, or we're not going to grow it. So you know, that's just the bottom, kind of the bottom line, so to speak, with this crop. So not a very good answer probably to those couple questions or comments, but stay tuned. We'll try to keep everybody in the loop as we work through our with our consultant and advisory committee, and so that you have, you know, some updated information. I'm sure at some point later in the summer we'll be offering, you know, some sessions on, you know, here's what we found out, just to share with everybody. We'll have all your emails because you registered, and we can pull those and at least share that information with everybody. Okay, so it's right around 2 o'clock. Are there any other questions? I think we've addressed them all that are on the. And thanks again for putting the link to the Global Hemp Association. We'll definitely take a look at that. I appreciate that. Okay, I'll let the link open here for a few more minutes. If anybody needs a few more minutes to go back and complete their survey, just click on that, and also the other link that was provided for the speaker survey. That would be great if you all would please complete that as well.